And we are live. Welcome to the Coatings Talk live stream, where you can join in the conversation live by posting your comments and questions. What a great topic tonight. What a great crew I got in the panel. We're going to have more people popping in and joining this conversation. We're going to be talking about SSPC-PA2 regarding how it's used and applied, and also we'll get into other discussions as well. So before we kick everything off, I'm just going to run around the horn here and have everybody introduce themselves. Let's start with Drayton. Drayton, who are you? What do you do? And all that kind of good stuff.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Jim. My name is Drayton Adkins. I am the Coatings Program Manager, SME for Black & Veatch. I have basically looked forward to having this discussion for many, many years, and I am super excited and pumped to be here with some of the titans of industry alongside me.
Perfect. Glad to have you. Murray Haywood.
Yes, Murray Haywood. I am currently with Corrosion Probe and have been since 2021. Prior to that, I was with Sherwin-Williams running the water and wastewater department for North America for a bunch of years, and then I was on my own, and I've been around the industry for like 43 years now. I started off as a kid. It's been actually longer than that, but people don't believe it because of the labor laws. Back then, there were no labor laws. So I started on the tools with my dad when I was like 12. And it wasn't really optional. It's not that I was, it was kind of, you want to eat, well, get in the truck, we're going to work. So, so I've been around for a while, and you may have seen me on LinkedIn or different things, webinars for Sherwin-Williams or whatever. So.
Or creating controversies, right?
Yeah, creating controversies, yeah. I seem to be relatively astute at that.
Like PA2. And also joining is Bill Corbett. Bill, it's so good. I don't ever remember if you and I have ever had an opportunity to do a stream together, but it's if it is our first time, welcome and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Bill Corbett spent 45 years with KTA Tater out of Pittsburgh. Retired at the end of 2024 and still doing some part-time technical stuff for KTA and also for ASTM and AMP. And I'm the document project manager for SSPC-PA2 and also the chair of AMP SC23, which PA2 falls under. So I guess that's why Jim invited me, as PA2 has been near and dear since I think I started working with that document back in 2007. So been around.
I just want to jump in here. Bill, you're retired?
I am, yes. I mostly retired back in December of 2024. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Drayton, you know that. You run into a lot of legacy people. No one ever retires from the coatings industry. Same thing on the corrosion side. No one ever retires.
Isn't that the truth?
You just fade away.
Exactly.
So, Bill, are you considered the father of PA2? Would you consider yourself to?
No. Probably, and it depends on who all is tuning in, but may remember a fellow by the name of Raymond Weaver. Ray Weaver, really, I would consider him the father of PA2. It actually was published back in 1973, and back then I was in junior high school, so I can't claim that that I was the father of it.
And joining us, we have Greg Sprinkle. Greg, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell everyone what you do.
Oh, certainly. Thank you. And I apologize. I was downloading the app on my Android. I had to use my cell phone, so I apologize for my tardiness. I'm Greg Sprinkle. I've been in the industry for almost 40 years now. Currently part owner of Industrial Inspection Group. We do a lot of QP5 inspections and throughout the country, water, wastewater, a lot of industry. So PA2 has been a staple for us since the 90s. And I appreciate the invite, and looks like you got a quality group here, James.
Oh, I'm glad to have you, and I'm glad to have everyone here on the call. Bill, if you could do a favor, and since your involvement with PA2 is very in-depth and broad and dealing with a lot of its machinations and everything else that goes along with revisions and changes, could you kind of describe exactly what SSPC PA2 is?
Sure. PA2 has evolved over the years. If you look back at some of the earlier versions, they really focus on how to use a dry film thickness gauge. And then there was a little bit of information at the end on how many readings you take and so forth. And it has evolved to really focus on the current version, which is 2022, is how many readings to take and how to process those readings and determine whether or not the measurements conform to the specification requirements. So it really focuses on frequency and acceptability of the measurements. There's a sister document, I always consider it, which is published by ASTM, which really focuses on how to set up your gauge, how to make sure it's accurate. It doesn't really talk about how many readings to take or how to determine whether or not those readings conform specification. It focuses on gauge use. So those two documents are really designed to be used to complement one another and not conflict with one another. So you see them, both of them referenced, but when you talk about PA2, really the intent of PA2 is to how many readings do I need to take and how to determine do those readings actually conform to my specification requirements, and then what to do if they don't.
Very good, very good. I had probably midweek, late last week, did a poll on LinkedIn regarding how SSPC-PA2 in industrial painting projects is applied on steel substrates, and basically the options were related to quality control using 5 spot readings. 18% people were did not understand PA2, and they said, "What is it?" So this is good, a timely live stream we're having tonight. And then QA provides a base DFT sample, and then the one that was overwhelming the selection for 40% said it's an objective method to verify. And so I think there's a lot of confusion that has really kind of over the number of years happened related to the standard. And, Murray, you had done a video, and you might want to talk about what inspired the video, talk about the video itself, but you also had done an article, I believe, regarding on the misapplication of SSPC PA2. So you want to talk a little bit about the video and how we got here?
Sure. So, it's been a sort of a thorn in my side for a lot of years, in just the sense that, like I said, I said it in the video, I said it in the white paper I wrote. I said, I think it's a good standard. I really do. I've always felt that upon reading it and trying to implement it, I've always considered it a QA standard, so a quality assurance standard, not a quality control standard. And that's where my problems with it became, because what I see, because I work with a lot of engineering firms and I work on a lot of specifications and I work on a lot of projects, and I see the engineers, and for any engineers that are, I'm with you. I'm your friend. I'm not trying to stomp on you here, but they take the easy button because they don't understand. Like, I talk to a lot of engineers, and the first thing I ask when I'm giving a lunch and learn to an engineer, how many people in this room have had more than 8 hours of coatings and linings instruction in your engineering career? Of course, I know the answer is 0. And then I work my way down to 1, and it's still 0. And there might be one little guy in the back who goes, yeah, I went to a seminar once, right? But they just don't learn about this stuff, right, in engineering education. So the only way they get it is through osmosis, or through working with paint manufacturers or consultants or whatever. So, but they would take PA2 and just pluck it in under QC as a way to measure coatings, and it's not enough. It's the same problem if you said if it's the same problem as if you were working on concrete and you just put in SSPC SP13 without any other information. So in other words, I could acid etch it, and I've answered PA13, So it's that. So I just found that it was giving them a false sense of security. They put it in there, and my challenge has always been, which I laid to in the paper, is that in reality, if that's all that you put in the spec, right? If it just says measurement PA2. Now the QC guy, we find out later that there was a lot of low areas, a lot of messed up. All he's got to do is stand by and say, hey, I measured it as for PA2. That's what the spec told me to do. It's pretty hard to hold him to that if that's all that he did. I don't think you'd be able to, I don't think it would stand up in court. I don't think you'd be able to hold their feet to the fire if that's all you have. So that's always, so my job as a consultant is always to protect my clients. And I don't think they're protected when they just put in PA2 without some additional language in there, right? So that's why, that was the reason why I did the video, why the reason I wrote the white paper, because I think it's an ongoing problem that needs to be addressed, and I didn't see anybody else tackling it. So me being one that doesn't mind getting punched in the face once in a while, I thought, well, I'll dive on that sword and let everybody beat up on me if they wish. For those who think that I'm wrong, and that's fine. I've never had a problem with anybody who wants to argue that if I'm wrong. I'm not always right, that's for sure. Ask my wife. I'm never right here. So there you go. That's why I did the video, and that's why I wrote the white paper.
But you bring up a really important point on that, where you were talking about, working for a coating manufacturer. We're going to be talking about basically PA2 from our perspective, right? We're not going to go a lot above and beyond that. And if you've got someone who's involved in the standards and developing the standards, or maybe the association that manages that and delivers that standard, they're going to provide information. You're going to have your engineers understanding a certain way. You're going to have your inspectors, obviously, that are working in the field. They've got the practical hands-on of that, so they know it a little bit more in depth and detail. So in a way, when you really think about it, is depending on, who is really kind of specifying it or how it's being used, and whoever kind of set that in motion, it depends on who they really talk to, is what's the degree of importance of PA2, and what are their good firm understanding of exactly what are they getting themselves into if they misappropriate it or misapply it. Is that kind of what you're saying is going on out in the industry right now?
Yes, I do think that. I think that the way that I interpret it, and Bill, you can tell me that, well, that I'm misinterpreting it myself, but the way I look at it is it's a perfect way, right? The amount of readings and everything, it's sort of a perfect way as from a QA perspective, right? Because you're not there full time. Maybe you're you're going into on a hold point or whatever, and you're going in and you're going to take random, because I'm selecting the areas. I'm not letting, well, at least you shouldn't. If you're letting the contractor lead you to where to take the PA2 measurements, we can have another discussion about that, because that's a bad idea. You're supposed to go in and randomly select these areas. So if I randomly select as per PA2's direction, and I randomly select and I don't find anything, I can, and I've also, been involved. Obviously, if I'm QA on the job, I'm not just showing up. That's not my first time on site. So I've already got a feel for the contractor. I've already got a feel for the kind of work they're doing, the kind of operation. I may even know them from past projects or something. I mean, we all know this is a tiny little industry, despite the enormity of it. It's very small. Just get a bad reputation and you'll find out how small it is. So, it's perfect for going in and randomly selecting, because now I can feel confident if I pick those random spots and I don't find anything, then I can go, okay, I feel I can take more than PA2, right? I can take more, I believe, than PA2. I don't think I can, but I could get pushback, but it does give me, I think, as a QA guy, a sense that, all right, I selected these random spots. I didn't let them manipulate or tell me where to do them. And I, as a QA guy, am always going to go. I think all good QA guys go to the hardest spots, right? I can train a monkey to paint the flat of a span of a bridge span or something. I mean, that's the easy spot. I'm going to the flanges. I'm going to the areas where I know they're notoriously missing. Now, if I check all that stuff as per PA2 and it comes back good, as a QA guy, I can feel pretty good. So I think there are some. That's the way I always saw PA2 as being really valuable from a QA perspective. But it doesn't say that on the document. It doesn't call it a quality assurance standard, right?
That's a good point. I remember SSPC. I don't know if AMP still does it. They used to have, what is PA2, and that was a real good informative breakdown that they were offering as a training course. I think it was online, and then it was also they would do it sometimes at the conferences. Maybe that's part of the equation is to get that information out there and to readily educate. Drayton and Greg and David, please, jump in and any aspect and perspective you want to offer. Yeah.
You've heard my opinion. I love to hear. And once again, I would not be offended if somebody said, Murray, I think you're full of crap. Here's what I think. I'm perfectly fine with that.
I'll jump in, James. The only pushback I'll throw at you a little bit is the SP13. It's a soundness of concrete standard. So yes, if you can use acid or water or blasting to achieve the soundness, the standard doesn't dictate the means, but you still have to achieve the soundness of concrete, which is dictated by the manufacturers through ASTM 7234 or some various means. So if they're just using acid and they think they can achieve the soundness of concrete, again, it's not related to profile, it's just soundness. So that's on that one. For me, for PA2, having used it for 40 years, I don't disagree with what Murray's saying. We're obviously a quality assurance, but we end up performing a lot of quality control, probably like he does. For me, where I've seen it in my career and even early in my career where I made some errors, and the ones I wanted to bring up tonight are a misapplication in industry. So what you'll see a lot of NACE inspectors or AMP inspectors out there doing galvanizing, fireproofing, that is not the standard for those. So I think that's where a lot of misuse comes in, people misunderstanding the ASTM 123 is for galvanizing. That dictates, they don't use 3 5-spot measurements, they use 5 3-spot measurements, and they dictate a third, a third, a third. So that's one. The other one, obviously fireproofing, that is not done per PA2. Just another industry that doesn't use it. There's other industries that don't. I would say if it's not specified, it is kind of the default for the industry to accept that. So scientifically or even legally, that's kind of why we would use it. But again, it can be, like Murray is saying, misapplied. And since I'm older, I will tell a story about misapplication. Early in my career, we do a lot of water tanks. So they're built, Jim, to a standard of D100. We would get a lot of welding inspectors that want to come out and use API 653 because D100 does not have a repair standard. So they come out and they want to use 653, which is fine. Again, you're just wanting to use some kind of industry standard to make steel structural repairs to a tank. The problem is in the verification of that with number of x-rays and the kind of requirements that it goes to, you can actually get into some situations that wasn't the work that was performed, but previous, and it creates all kinds of problems. And I think that's somewhere also where the misapplication of PA2 can come in. Either under amount of readings or not defined properly. And I think all of us would probably say if it's defined, then that would become the standard. And then the contractor's responsibility, they're getting paid to put the proper mills on, not the inspector. So it's their responsibility. If that's specified as PA2, I would strongly encourage them to follow that standard and make sure it complies. Then they could have pushback if my readings were separate from where they took theirs. So that's really, Jim, what I wanted to bring is just the misapplication. Personally, another one I'll throw out there, just since this is a good time to be honest, I wasn't always really good about calibrating my gauge at the end of readings. I didn't really appreciate the importance of that and the legalities of making sure post readings, whether you're going to be taking several hours worth of readings, you should be calibrating that gauge every hour, maybe every 2 hours, because what happens is, and it's happened to me, if those gauges are out of, yeah, Murray too, probably all of us maybe, but very guilty here until I went and actually highlighted and reread the whole standard. I was blown away at some of my assumptions, I guess I would say. Bill's got a great grasp. He's all, very well received. I'm sure Drayton's got a good grasp. I'm kind of field. I'm probably got a lot of Murray in me. You know what I mean? So I'm probably out there taking random measurements when it's not just specified, but that's all I wanted to say, Jim, is the misapplication and making sure if you want it to be used, then it would be specified. And that's really it. And stop using it for galvanizing and fireproofing.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. But I see, I always, when I was doing QC, whenever I was doing QC, I've spent most of my time doing QA, but I did do a lot of QC as well. And I always felt when I was doing QC, like for instance, on a bridge girder, maybe it's 60 feet long, 4 feet high, whatever it is. I would literally take thousands of readings. I wanted to make sure I found everything possible. I wanted the QA guy to find nothing when he come on board. Like I was embarrassed if he
I
found
agree with
something. If he found something in his random 5 spots of 3, if he found something, I wanted to punch myself in the face. How did I let that happen? Right? Like, that shouldn't happen, because I take thousands of readings to make sure his 45, he finds nothing. And then he walks away and we carry on. Right?
I fully agree with that. Fully agree. I mean, the contractor should know where they're at with their project before that person's coming out to perform that test.
Well, because we've all been in a QA situation where you've showed up, and this is almost as irritating as the other way, is if I show up and the first 4 spots I put my gauge on are low, I'm like, guys, why am I here?
That starting point.
Yeah, you just wasted my time, and now I'm going to charge you anyway. Sorry, because I came here expecting. You told me to come. You told me you were ready. The first 5 spots I measured were low. I'm leaving. I'm not doing your QC for you, because I know that's kind of what you're trying to do. Is, well, can you just mark up all the spots that you find? No, I can't, because that's not my job. So then I'm leaving, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I fully agree, Murray. Fully agree.
So PA2 is not a production tool, is what you're saying there, Murray, for the contractor.
No. It's just, it doesn't give. There's just not enough data points. And what is enough? I don't know what enough is. Enough is when you have it right. Then you've done enough. It's hard to put a definite. So the wording I tend to use is the contractor it needs to take as many readings as necessary to ensure compliance with the specification, period. Whether that's 5,000 or 2, I don't know. You know your applicators, only you know your staff, only you know your capabilities, Mr. Contractor.
Yeah.
So that's up to them.
You're trying to stay away from the prescriptive aspect of, yeah.
Jim, one of the things that Greg brought up that I think is a really interesting point is the intumescence to fireproofing. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised at the number of readings that are required for that particular coating. And because PA2 was very much lacking in that area, Russell Norris with Sherwin-Williams put together a fantastic appendix, which was published in the most recent issue. And then, ironically, immediately said, okay, now that it's published, we need to improve it. And so he's working on that now. And we're probably going to start opening the document again in 2026 rather than 2027 when it's due, because of the value that document, specifically Appendix 11 of that document, brings to the intumescent fireproofing industry. Because there was a gap there, and all the manufacturers of those types of coatings said, we have a gap. PA2 does not fit the gap, nor do any other documents, so we need one. So that was kind of why that was brought about. And then something that Murray brought up that we were talking a little bit about beforehand is, if you think for a second that the frequency of measurement that's prescribed in PA2 is statistically significant, you need to go back and take a statistics course, because you're touching a fraction of the coated surface, right?
Yeah.
And if you want more measurements, well, there's an appendix for that too, right? There's the scanning and the continuous readout devices, where you can take many more readings. But again, if you want that as a specifier, you need to put that in, because it's non-mandatory, right? You have to say, I want it measured per PA2 Appendix 10.
Yeah,
and there you go.
Yep, 810.
Yeah.
And
so just, I'll be quiet here, but my point is always, be careful what you're asking for. Be careful what you're specifying. If you just say, well, I need a dry film thickness standard. Oh, here's one, PA2, you invoke it. you need to look at that document and see what it says, because you may want to invoke one of the appendices, or you may say, I don't like this document. I'm going to write my own requirements in for dry film thickness frequency into my specification because I don't like this document. It's not enough.
Well, and I've always, like I said in my video and in the paper, there's aspects of PA2 that work for both QC and QA, like how to verify the gauge and that sort of thing. Even investigating low areas, taking it out this way, taking it out that way. That's valuable for both QC and QA. But it's the number of readings that it prescribes that, once again, I think it's a pretty good tool for a QA assessment. Once again, I'm going to evaluate how many readings I take based on my understanding of the contractor quality from maybe, like, you know, there's always the first time you work with somebody and that's a learning curve. But most of the time, the guys out there doing inspection day in and day out are running into the same actors over and over again, or the same people over and over again, right? We see the same contractors, especially like if you work in water, wastewater, there's a set of contractors that work in water, wastewater. There's a certain contractors that only paint bridges, right? And I think that the two shouldn't cross that much, but that's another story too. But concrete and steel are very different. But I think that, you know, there's stuff within there that is valuable for both. I just think that there's a slippery slope, and mostly I think it's a lack of understanding at the engineering level where they simply pluck that in there thinking, I've covered that off. I don't have to worry about that anymore.
It's a magic bullet. Yeah. And I looked at the aspect of, you know, over inspection versus smart sampling, you know, and you're talking about, you know, the QA is basically, you know, verifying, you know, that the QC was done. The QC, to your point, Murray, when you're talking about doing, you know, thousands of measurements and things like that, again, it comes down to what your process is. You determine that. And the nice thing with PA2, if it is invoked in there, it's going to be more about the smart sampling versus over inspection and forcing that QA to, you know, pull thousands of measurements. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now I'm curious because I mean, I was around when that document came out, but I was probably working for my dad, and my dad, you know, my dad wasn't concerned about things like that, as he wasn't that concerned about safety, for instance. You know, but you know, so I don't know what the premise of it was when they brought it out. What the original intent was? Was it to you know? And I don't know, Bill, if you have any insight into the original intent. Was it just to lay out a way, like you said originally, it was how to set up your gauges, how to take readings with the gauges, maybe how to verify the gauges, but it didn't have the number of readings, and it kind of morphed over the years, right? Would that be accurate?
Yeah, and you're going to test my memory because I don't.
Just 73.
I looked at the 73 version a very long time ago, and just curious. I remember back then, that's all we had was type 1 gauges, right? Magnetic pull-off gauges, and you know, how accurate were you even being with those types of gauges? But yeah, it really did more from, this is how to set up your gauge, and this is how you take measurements, into what do we need to do to get a indication that the contractor conformed to the requirements of the specification. Because it's not a statistical sampling, it's a reasonable number of measurements to assess whether or not the coating conforms, right? Like you said, it's QA. Right. QC, they're going to go in there and probably take many more readings, and they're going to focus on the areas that are difficult to coat, because you know those are areas that might be light or heavy. And when they're ready for a QA inspection, then QA has to be careful not to over inspect, because they do need to follow PA2 if it's specified.
Right. So I guess in sense, the original intent of PA2 was a quality assurance piece versus a quality control piece.
who knows? Because if you think that division of QA and QC, that's pretty recent.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
I don't know that division was even thought about in the 70s and 80s. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right.
They're synonymous almost to this day.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
they're used interchangeably a lot, which kind of But I try to point out, even with specifications, I hate it in the specifications. So they got the section is called quality assurance, but then it's got a whole bunch of stuff. And I said, no, stop doing that. Just call it quality.
Yeah.
And then you list quality assurance, quality control, and you list all the different things on there, but don't call the section quality assurance. Just call it quality management or something else, not quality assurance, because that just muddies the water more, right?
Yeah, testing requirements. Yeah. Hey, Jim, I have another big one for you guys that I wrote down that I will admit also when I struggled with a little bit, but I find it very valuable. And this one would cross to Murray's and Bill's, crosses over quality assurance and quality control. So this is another one of those in the spec that is either underused, not understood, or not utilized, would be the table 1, which is the different levels of conformance. So I don't know if a lot of people are aware. Again, this is still May 30 years ago. I wasn't really aware that level 3 was kind of default, meaning that's the rule that everybody knows in our industry. And I promise you, everyone in the world believes this outside of having to take your tests, right? Is it's 80-120. Every contractor preaches it. Everybody's just like,
and they think it's another blanket.
It's a magic number, no matter what. Now, there's certain types of coatings, as all of us would know, in, very intumescence being a very, very big one, where those fire ratings are based on millages or thicknesses, correct? So all their fire ratings are based on how thick that is, meaning, so that could be a level 1, right? Where it's 100%, meaning no unders, no overs, or some of those things. High temperature coatings have that ability to, where you don't want to overbuild or underbuild zincs, for example. So again, that's one of those, Jim, that I promise you, every one of my inspectors, all 17, we could probably pull half of them and be like, they'd be like, oh yeah, 81-20. Not reading necessarily the specification, and just those are underused and not understood in my 40-year career.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because there's been so many times that I've been out on the job site and I found highs or lows, and they go, well, 81-20. I go, dude, that doesn't work across the board. It's not a blanket like you can be 81-20 everywhere. That's not how it works. And I go, yes, it is. I go, no, it is. Have you read the standard?
It's a single spot measurement, right?
It's only for one spot. That spot can be.
That doesn't affect the average. It still can't be underneath. Yeah, I know that.
Right.
Yeah.
But they think it's a blanket statement that this 81-20 is this magic thing that gets them out of all kinds of.
Well, Murray, it's like SSPC-6. It's 33% of the steel can be rusted. So, I mean, it's the same one, right?
Yeah. But they think that it can be 33% of the
not this big. They think of the whole thing. They're like a third of it we didn't blast because we get to do a third of it.
We still need SP6,
yeah. They're like, well, they look at a sheet of steel, right? A third of a tank steel, and they're like, a third of that's bad, and it's like, unfortunately, that's not how it works. But anyway, I digress. Sorry, Jim.
They do misinterpret it, and I pointed that out in my paper that 81-20 rule thing is highly misunderstood, misquoted, misused. The same as the commercial blast one. I mean, especially on new steel when all the mill scale's coming off, you don't have the heart to tell them it's actually a 5. You know what I mean? But that's absolutely true. So
you got to get them there slowly. Yeah, you got to work them into that.
Yeah. And that table, that coating thickness restriction level table that we put into the standard, it's
what
been
year did that come in?
It's been probably, I'm not exaggerating, it's probably been in there 15-20 years.
Yeah.
Because you only update it every 5 years or so. So that was probably the 3rd or 4th version back.
I'm thinking mid 2000s.
Yeah. And
2012.
Yeah, 2012, I think.
Yeah, and it's underutilized. I think more facility owners, more specifiers, let's put it that way, should consider, is 81-20 the default level 3 for the spot measurements? Are you okay with that?
Manufacturer too, Bill, right?
Sure. The manufacturer should weigh in as well. For example, the thermal spray metallizing guide 23 that the three societies put out several years ago. It invokes level 4. So you can be 50% over the maximum. You just can't be, 20% below the, or more than 20% below the minimum of any single spot measurement. So there's a good application of that. Little extra metallizing isn't going to hurt anything. Just got to make sure you meet the minimum. But we don't see the levels used hardly ever. And quite honestly, and I do remember this, it's the reason why we made level 3 the default, because that's what the standard was always based on, was 80% of the minimum, 120% of the maximum in the spot. So,
yeah, I know that's true. You don't see the levels used a lot, especially one of the other challenges, I think, and I put this out to the coating manufacturers, and I've harped about this for years too, and probably to the point where they wish I'd shut up, but they have to have realistic ranges. Like anybody who's ever put on who's ever applied any coatings, and you get a 1 mil, like when they say 2 to 3 mils.
Yeah.
So, guy, do you have any idea what you're asking for here in the field? Do you have any concept of what you're asking for?
And level 1. And level 1, Murray.
Yeah. And so do you have any idea what you're asking for, right? And that just tells me that the people that do that have never applied paint before. Never,
right? Especially when the data sheet allows 2 to 6 or something. That's what's even funnier. They put 2 to 3 on the urethane or 4 to 6 on the epoxy. With the data sheet says 4 to 10. It's like just go ahead and put the 4 to 10. Unless it's an overcoat or something specific, right? If you're overcoating or there's something surface tolerant that you have conditions with, but otherwise you're exact. That's a thousandth of an inch. We just said panels when I was a manufacturer.
Before we go on, Dave came in kind of late. We should let him introduce himself.
Oh, I apologize, David.
Yeah, that's all right.
That's okay.
I only know him from LinkedIn, but I love his stuff, so I want to hear his story. And
David's amazing. David, tell us who you are. I apologize, my friend.
No, that's okay. I was late, so I deserve it. And you guys were having a great discussion, so I was enjoying it. I'm David Revet. One of the younger guys that are in this industry, I think.
Hey, we need you, brother.
Right. I've been in the industry since 2012. I got my level 1 then, and I worked under Kirk Shields for many years, and he threw me on all kinds of projects, and from a skyscraper in Pittsburgh to wastewater treatment plants, bridges, and solar farms, paper mills, wastewater treatment plants, and I think that's it for him. Then he also was the one to bring me to Florida and put me on my first yacht. And I didn't even know that was a thing that our industry could even be involved with. Yeah. And it turns out that they desperately need help.
And you have a different yacht every day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I have like 4 or 5 yachts a week, give or take. Amazing. And it's everything: topside coatings, the bottom that is anti-fouling and barrier primers. It's all of it is mostly epoxies and urethanes for top coats. But then there's water, and there's basically mini water and wastewater treatment plants built into the yacht. They have 10,000, 12,000 gallon tanks that need inspected, and ballast tanks, all of that. And then in addition, this is where this industry is like, I've been loving it just because I really find this stuff interesting. But like galvanic corrosion, like they play with every metal that you could possibly think of. And the efficiency isn't so much the concern. It's how can we make this as cool or interesting or unique as possible? And they just will throw money at the problem, but it gets messy, really messy. You'll have a steel hull, aluminum deck, aluminum house, stainless steel bulkheads will get thrown in. And then they have a cathodic protection system or impressed current system where the crew thinks like if more is better, so they'll crank it up. And then I've seen burnt weld seams on the bottom paint. So this industry is my favorite by far.
It's a wild, wild west. Yeah.
I didn't know we did yachts either, Dave. That's awesome.
No, yeah,
I see some of your posts too, by the way. I enjoy your stuff as well.
cool.
Yeah.
But
Great.
yeah, my
What do you
honest
have?
oh, good.
No, sorry, Dave.
I was just gonna say, like, my honest, like, big goal, working with this younger guy named Sean. He's over in Texas, but him, Jim, and I are like, there's a huge hole. Like, anytime you go on YouTube, I know KTA put out a bunch of content like 11 or 13 years ago, something like that. But like outside of that, there's nothing. Like, no information available. No one talks about the career. Nothing.
Well, I know I saw you post a video which I appreciated, because I did getting young people into the industry video a little while ago, and it's
Like you.
Yeah, it's a very real problem, right? It's a very real problem, not just from but also the applicators. It's the applicators, it's the inspectors, and you know, I know we're getting a little off topic here, but one of my pet peeves has been, you know, I ran paint. I was a contractor, and you know, I figure, you know, when people would come up to me and say, they'd say, "Oh, I got this guy. He's not all there, but he might make a pretty good painter." I go, "Hey, gee, thanks for your vote of confidence for my trade."
Yeah, thanks.
Right? Like, you know, like seriously, like, we need to draw. Like, kids got to realize that not everybody can be an electrician, not everybody can be a plumber, not everybody can be a tin knocker. You know, we have there's a pathway, as we can attest. Like, I mean, I came off the tools. I was a painter. I went to school, but I was a painter, and I worked for my father, and I worked my way up, and then I decided to get off the tools, and I went to work for the coating manufacturers, and I worked for almost all of them, and kept moving my way up the ladder, and then I went on my own, and then I went, you know, so there is a ladder to success, and a ladder to grow your career if you choose to do so. Or it's perfectly fine to just become a really awesome painter and do excellent work and just stay right there. There's nothing wrong with that either. But we do need to attract people to our industry, and that's why these kind of conversations, the content we release, and I'm putting out lots. I know you're doing, Dave. Like, I try to do as much as I can content-wise, and keep videos coming out. But the more we do, the more conversations, the more we draw the young people in to show them that there's a pathway. That this is, we're like, I think I forget what video it was, but I challenged the plumbers. I said, I think that you need to know more to be an industrial painter than you need to know to be a plumber. And I challenge plumbers, come at me if you disagree with that. I really believe that. There's a lot to know. Right? You're working with chemicals, you're working with solvents, you're working with at height, you're working with safety, you're working with, you know, it's hard work. Like, you don't want to go into that if you think it's going to be lightweight. So it's hard work, but it's rewarding work. So anyway, we got off topic, but
no, we didn't, because this is really a big thing for me too. I mean, right here on this panel right here, we've got subject matter experts from all different aspects and angles, right? You know, like myself, you know, I'm not a practical person. I'm not an inspector. I was never a painter. And, you know, maybe I'm great at creating content and things like that. But you got people like Drayton, you've got, you know, a strong engineering background. You know the ins and out of a lot of things. You're an MCI, you're a PCS. I mean, you're a, you know, not only a triple threat, you're whatever, an infinity threat out there when it comes to knowledge and information. You know, and I know you got Drayton, you're going to be doing content. Murray, you're doing content. Greg, start doing content. David, you're doing content, and your YouTube channel is starting to blow up. And a lot of it is not just related to super yachts. It's to the other stuff you're talking about. We all need to do it, because right now the average age of the industry is getting older and older, and it's on corrosion and coating side, and AMP membership is getting older and older. And we've got to get these young professionals, get the young guys like Drayton and younger, get them to really
here's a hot take for you on that, right? So sorry, Bill, sorry, Murray, and sorry, soon to be Greg. You guys got to retire all the way. You got to make space.
that too, for real.
I don't mean it in a bad way, but so I'm 36 years old. I'm second generation. My father's in the industry. I grew up at a Sherwin-Williams store.
Yeah.
And everybody that's in the industry has some sort of crazy, like, how did you get into it? Like, feel why did you get here? Who brought you in? Because it's not very well known. But like Murray said, there is a path to success for everybody here. There is the corrosion industry supports marketing professionals, chemists, inspectors, painters, from a quality management standpoint, you name it. Yeah, sales. It's insane to me that the type of success you can have here. I'm a college dropout and a high school dropout, by the way. I am the global process owner for one of the largest EPC firms in the country. Right? How did I get here? Right? Because of the amount of mentorship I received early on in my career. The type of projects that I was handed were varied and oftentimes awful. And you can get somewhere with work ethic and a decent, you don't have to be a genius to do well in this industry either. You just have to have a decent head on your shoulder. A little
I
bit
know
of
genius.
and you could go far. So I think certainly for me, I have noticed, and that's why I asked earlier on if Bill was really retired, because nobody ever seems to actually retire. And the people are living a lot longer. I've been trying to be an AMP instructor for years, right? So, and basically the answer I get all the time is, we don't need anymore because everybody retires and teaches. So that's just one specific example. But even I backfilled somebody at Black and Beach who was 73 years old, right? Was doing this, has been in this industry 50 some odd years. So and if that person didn't retire, I wouldn't have a job. And that's going to be common hand over fist, I think, in all these areas. Now, is it a chicken or the egg thing? Do you guys need to retire and then we'll get people? Or do we need to get people so you can retire? Can't answer that question. But ultimately, I think the wages and the labor rates will increase too if there's more vacancies, supply and demand, right? So the more there is a need and people not filling it, that would help, I think, on all aspects. So I know that this is not about PA2, but ultimately, this is a huge conversation in the industry.
It sounds like you're trying to kick our ass out of the industry. That's what it sounds like.
Well, the one thing listen,
Jim,
Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Murray.
No, I do want to go on record though, Jim. 5 of our inspectors are under the age of 31.
there you go.
There you go.
5 of them, and 3 of them are between 23 and 25.
I have three sons. My oldest one is a level 3. He's 43 years old. My middle one is a level 2. He's 31 years old, and my youngest is sales rep for Sherwin-Williams. He's just getting going and he's selling. So all my kids are in the industry. Yeah. Right. And I thought none of them were coming in, right? Because they said the same thing. I left painting for a while when I was younger, and I said, I'm not going to. I said to my dad, I said, I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life. He goes, okay, smart guy, and away I went. And of course I came back, but I didn't think my kids all said, no, we're not interested in that. I don't want to do that.
When you left to go rock and roll, right? With the
We're kindred spirits. That's what happened to me. I didn't start in the industry. I grew up in a Sherwin-Williams store, and I hated my dad in paint, and I was never going to touch it. I toured the country. I played a lot of music, and I said, I'm going to be famous. I don't need your stupid career.
Yes. I was going to be a rock star.
Yeah.
Look how that worked out. But anyway,
bring this back a little closer to PA2. But related to what we're talking about, one of the things, and I've given a couple of talks at the request of AMP at the national conference, is trying to get young people engaged with standards development and maintenance. It's quote unquote volunteer type work. It's desperately needed. But when you challenge people to say, not even be a document project manager, but help maintain these standards, vote, get involved, get on a committee and vote when one comes on the ballot. And so to Drayton's point, that's one of the reasons why I'm hanging around. I'm not an AMP instructor at all.
I am.
No, I'm just kidding. Don't go.
Because there's no one really interested in taking on these jobs that are, they're PA2. It's a very controversial standard. I guarantee you, when it comes out for ballot again next year, we'll have a fight on our hands. We always do.
Sorry about that, Bill.
Not for Murray, though, right?
Yeah, but it's okay. That's what
he'll be retired by then.
It makes it a better
retiring.
This is a very punchable phase.
Yeah. And
he's retiring anyway.
The other thing I wanted to say was, David, I knew your dad extremely well, right? We worked together in the industry for years. But right before you introduce yourself, I think what you had on your forehead was a wet film thickness gauge.
Yes.
And same, I mean, it was perfect, because I think if more applicators would actually use that instead of saying, I don't need no stinking wet film thickness gauge, I've been painting for 20 years. I was at a class one time, and the owner of that particular contracting company said, Bill, I need the floor for a minute. And he said, I am tired of paying for reapplication of coatings because you guys won't use wet film thickness gauges. And one of the students, I couldn't believe it, spoke up and said, I've been painting for a long time. I can tell how thick a paint is by looking at it. And he said, I don't need the gauge. And the owner of the company said, when you're driving, do you ever look down at the speedometer to see how fast you're going? And the guy said, well, of course I do. And he said, how many years have you been driving? You still got to look at that speedometer? Can't you tell how fast you're going just by feel? It was a great point. You know, very good applicators out there. And I swear some, I think, can tell how thick a paint is by looking at it. But they got that wet film thickness gauge that it's almost like they're afraid to use the training wheels. It's okay. You know, it could mean the difference between reapplication the next day or, God forbid, sanding something down. So anyways, wanted to bring that up because I thought David.
Well, it's all part and parcel, right? Like, it's all part and parcel where, you know, I always look for the telltale signs on the coveralls, you know, where you can see where they're wiping off the wet film. But
Yes.
I call what I call them is a controversial name, so I won't mention it. But this is probably a family show. But so I you know, you look for that. But you're right. Like, it's almost like they just refuse to do it, and it's like, because they say that's the same thing. And that was kind of, my dad used to use that. Looks a smart guy. I've been doing this for 40 years. And like he said that about using his blinkers, right? I've been driving for 40 years and never had an accident. And I said, well, you because he didn't use his blinkers. I said, but you've left a trail of destruction behind you that you're unaware of. And that's what these guys are like, right? They always say, well, I've been doing this for 40 years. I know what I'm doing. Maybe you've been just getting lucky. Right. A lot of people have gotten lucky because a lot of stuff that they did was never checked up on again. Right. Like
or they use PA too, maybe.
That's right.
Well, I think another point of that is, if you've gone 40 years and you've never been checked or subpoenaed or whatever, called to question, right? You've never learned.
Yep.
See,
Right.
So I think a lot of what we have now is a function of it. It's a different world today. So again, I'm young. But if I was painting in the 80s and 90s, it's a totally different world nowadays from a quality standpoint, both internally QC or QA. And if you are involved in one of those knockdown, drag out, legal, awful battles, you will be championing that wet film gauge on your next, if you're a PM or a super or something, right? You'd be like, absolutely. Here's a stack of them. I better see them used every freaking unit or whatever.
Well, one of the things I always say, right, and I've been involved in lots of court cases because as an expert witness, people won't get it until it costs them money.
Yep.
Yeah.
Every single thing that I have locked in this giant noggin of mine is because, if I remember, it's because it probably cost me money. You know, seriously, if it doesn't cost, if there's zero cost to you, you just float through. And a lot of these guys have never been taken to task. Because they've gotten away with murder by not having, you know, because what happens a lot of time is the failure happens outside of the warranty period, or the owner doesn't even, that, you know, it failed, and the guy who is now in charge of that facility doesn't even know who painted it. So that nobody gets taken to task, right? Because records aren't kept and nobody knows what the hell's going on. That guy retired or died or whatever, and nobody knows what happened on this job. So they just pay to have it done again, right? Even though it was only done not that long ago. And these guys, a lot of these guys have skated through based on the fact that they were just never caught. They just got lucky, right? And that's the same, you know, when it comes to, you know, PA2 is part of a quality thing, right? And one of the things that drives me nuts about the way we do things, municipalities and everything, is we always have money to build it, but we never have money to maintain it or to do it right. Right. I did a video a while ago. Never, ever one time can anybody point to me one time we're doing it the right way the first time to the highest quality was not the best value over the long term. Never. It's never been proven. You can't prove that because it's true every single time. So PA2 is part of that. Getting it right is part of that. Measuring it enough is part of that. All these steps are part of getting that quality up so that these things last for a long time. And you know, I've heard painters say, well, I don't want to do it too good because I want to do it again, right? Well, you know what? If you don't have to do that thing again, do you not think they're going to have something else for you to do? Right? You know,
That's the only tank in the whole world.
Yeah,
Yep.
you just want to paint that one
Lap yard.
clarifier every
And
2
endless money
years for the rest of
machine.
your life.
Yeah.
Right?
So here's a question that maybe Bill and Murray, so I will defer to the wizened folks here. From my standpoint, right, Murray, we talked about PA2 being, you know, maybe insufficient for certain quality control activities. If we were to understand philosophically where it was as a industry, not just this panel, but as a whole, right? If we were to be able to say this document is a minimum standard, sort of like the paint series or any of the other minimum standards that exist out there, we can look at those and go, nobody ever goes up, right? It never happens. Nobody specifies more than, you know, C222 or whatever. It's like a set it and forget it thing. And as somebody who works with engineers daily, the cost of doing good engineering work is expensive because of all of the things you're responsible for. So being able to go through and read the specifier notes or the specifier comments in PA2 to understand how to effectively use that document are quite likely not going to happen for the masses that specify coatings, right? There's one of me and 11,000 Black and Veatch employees. That should give you some idea of how spread thin many of these engineering firms are. And some of them don't even have me. They got nobody. So
That's true.
The majority don't.
yeah. So ultimately, we as the industry in 1973 had a different outlook of how these things were being used. NACE didn't have the brand equity it had today. There wasn't as many jobs. It wasn't spanning as many markets, as many critical assets. The life cycle of these assets was taken at a different face value than it is now.
Labor was cheap.
Labor, yeah, exactly. You had plenty of people willing to do work at any given moment. So the landscape was different. And as we've evolved over the last, 80 years or 100 years or so now that we've been doing protective coatings, truthfully, it's we've taken the model and just gone, let's just revise it. Let's just do a red line, and we add incrementally to it. We need to press the reset button if it's fundamentally different by using a different pathway to explain to the industry how this document or documents in general can be used. I think we have to reset because there's a stigma with PA2 and it will delete. If we go and do the different thing with it, we won't just have a bunch of legacy documents that get copy pasted all over the place that are just going to continue that problem.
Sure. Well, one of the interesting things that came out of Appendix 10, which is the scanning, continuous read, when that technology was brought to our industry, it's been around a while, but when that technology was brought to our industry, the knee-jerk reaction was, well, let's just require everybody to use scanning continuous read because look how many measurements you can take and so forth. Be careful because now what are you going to do with all this data, right? So what AMP did a couple of years ago is they put together a guide to invoking that. Here's the benefits of doing it, and here's the dangers of doing it. So a specifier can go into it very knowledgeably saying, I would love to invoke Appendix 10, but I think it's going to be a little bit overboard. Or, wow, this is what I need for my job because this is an acid storage tank. This is a critical application. And do people even know about that guide? It's real. I mean, it was a lot of good work, and it's published. It's out there. But getting people to read these things and recognize them and weigh whether or not that they're valuable or they want to invoke something.
People that are like myself know about that guide. right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
who we need to know about that guide is not people like myself. It's the total
Right.
neophytes that need that help. And so it's a catch-22 if AMP, sponsors a document or anything that helps procedures for specifiers. AMP is not a very commonly referenced organization to the engineering community unless you are specifically in corrosion. And then therefore you probably are already knowledgeable enough to use PA2 effectively. It's an odd scenario.
Yes.
I
True.
don't think that so from my standpoint too, and I want to preface this, I didn't say this earlier. So I disagree that PA2 is lacking. And I wasn't saving the hot take for later. I just forgot to get it in edgewise because everybody sounds like they're in agreement with Murray. So from a specification standpoint, I do agree that people should, use it correctly. If you need to specify something other than level 3, you have to say that. If you would like to invoke an appendices, please, don't just put PA2 and call it a day. But ultimately, statistically, this is an industry consensus-based document for determining conformance to a written range of numbers. And if we take away all of that, right, and you just say, if I need to determine if you are conforming or non-conforming to a contractual obligation in the specification, this is one way to do that. And even if the QC only does PA2, right, so Murray, you've done some expert witness work and you've been in some law cases, which I thankfully have never had to do on either side of the bench. But ultimately, even if we don't like the standard, if you have done something in accordance with PA2 and all the little ins and outs on it, including the reporting one, which by the way, that's the one that everybody misses, is how to report it accurately in my mind. At least that's a starting point. We've all been on the same page. We've all spoken the same language. Because ultimately, I find as a specifier, that's the hardest part, is translating work that is done off a recipe sheet. And how do we say you did it right or wrong? How do we become objectively unbiased in the gauging of the work that was performed? If I say I want a 12-inch beam, right, or a 12-foot beam, I can go measure it. Nobody argues with the tape measure. They don't say, well, where's your certificate of calibration for your tape measure? They don't get overly litigious in that sense. But PA2 is not as simple as the length of something, but it does provide a very nice standard ground for everybody to stand in and go, yes. Now, are there arguments? Did you arbitrarily select that location, Murray? I know you went to the flanges because, that guy's too short and he doesn't get the top side. He never gets the toes right. That's outside of this. That's just good painting practice. And I think a QC and a QA should all come together on the same project to get to an effective product by saying, hey, I noticed that guy needs a step stool. I'm not going to check his gauge, or I'm not going to check his stuff right now, but I'm going to have a problem with it. I don't need to use PA2 to see, if I see there's a lack or an issue, I don't need PA2 to stand on that leg to say you didn't do the work.
Right.
And that's where ultimately, so like we have a lot of work that we don't have third-party inspection on, but I do require them to submit a PA2 report. If I was there, would I feel more comfortable? Yes, I would. But if they submit the PA2 report, at least I'm more comfortable than I would be just buying it sight unseen.
And you're okay with that, even providing that they're doing it like five spots of 3 for the first, they all like measuring, and you're okay with that?
I'm not okay with it. I'm okay with that the industry consensusly has come together to be okay with that. And it is safety in numbers and understanding that the generation before me helped shape that document that gives me that comfortability. Now, if that was all wrong, and remember, like Bill said, it's like herding cats. If nobody's ever been on a standards committee, it's like there's 40 people in the room and 2 people talk. That's it.
I've been working on I've worked on standards. I'm still working on several that have been going on for 2.5 years, and we're every time we think we're there, it gets blown up again by just, you think you're at the end of it, and then one guy goes, yeah, but, and it's like, and right back to the drawing board. But
Leave Greg alone.
and no, that's fine. I just think that so I'd like you to articulate that out a little bit. So now your QC on a project, and all the specification says is measure for a PA2. And what now? How many readings are you doing?
You remember the ITP, the old SSPC ITP 3-column format?
Yeah.
Right. So PA2 is a very unique document, as it is one of the only ones that fills out the acceptance criteria, not the actual range that's provided by the specification, but the acceptance criteria of that range, the frequency of the range, and the test method that they are using to do it. All three of them are encapsulated in PA2. That's why it's such an onerous and gargantuan document, right? So if you just say it should be done per PA2, you are saying the acceptable criteria, the go, no go criteria. You are saying the frequency with which it needs to be done. And so you it does sound like you're not doing a great job, but you really do ultimately have everything you need to measure dry film thickness and to make sure it conforms with the stated.
But the QC inspector, the applicator, let's just say that, they don't know where the QA inspector is going to select those areas and spots and areas and spots. So to maybe Murray's point, they may have to take a lot more measurements to make sure that when that QA inspector does go into the tank, no matter where he checks, because he has no control over that, he's going to get the right answer. And that, I think that's what we're talking about. And maybe Drayton, I misunderstood your comment there.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly my point. Is again, from the bare minimum standpoint, I need you as a QC. So wet film gauge mark. I'm seeing the notch marks on your sleeve. I see them on your pants. I feel good, right? The messaging is good there. I used to do third-party inspection too. So it's the perception of quality, right, is important. But if you're not there at all, and you have to look at a project that was done just on paperwork, right? Don't get a chance to go. You don't get a chance to see. There are so many things that can be misinterpreted in the field and done outside of those ranges. But if you are doing a good job in the field, that requires, I think, the paint applicator, whether that's the QC or the painters themselves or whomever, doing a lot of informal checks. It is very difficult from a specification standpoint to write that. You got to keep checking. You got to look. You got to use a wet film thickness gauge, because we're all managing costs too, right? If the overly prescriptive specs I get the FU tax on the bid form. So at the end of the day, how do we find the consensusing middle for these options where we want to see that quality of work go up, right? But we ultimately don't want to pay more than what we're paying today because we think that we're already paying for quality work.
But that, I think, is where the disconnect is I don't know that we are actually paying for quality work.
So you think that we're ultimately what we're asking is not enough and we should be paying more to get more quality?
Well, because I think if you paid more and let's say you paid 20% or 25% more than you're paying right now. And I've got case histories of this where I know that they're not charging enough money for this, and therefore they can't give the quality because they simply aren't charging enough for it. So they're cutting corners or they're getting to the end of it and they're realizing, oh man, we're upside down here. And so we got to start hurrying or cutting corners. So if you paid more money to have better quality, which to me almost comes down to, I look at my world, okay, and I say, what I hear out there in my world are the best contractors do not want to bid municipal work anymore. They're not chasing municipal work. They're going out to private work where they can get paid more and they get paid for quality because they're private.
It's a race to the bottom.
Right.
Everybody is like, and those estimates, proposals, everything they do, that's not like, oh, hey, we're going to do this real quick. And they throw, like, they're big documents that are heavily, detailed. And I've seen in Florida, it's kind of the Wild West, but like I've seen a ton of big contractors, their crew do not know anything. Nothing. They don't know. They never heard of a wet film gauge. They've been painting for 3 years. And it's like, there's no one, there is a huge disconnect, and I'm not exactly sure where it is, but it's like, I noticed that if there's any job that they're trying to get the cheapest, whatever, if that's the focus, like it's not even worth, like I don't even want to be on the project because it's always a disaster.
Well, there's a reason why a Mercedes costs more than a Chevy Cruiser. There's a reason for that. There's a quality reason, right? There's a quality, and it's not just luxury. I'm not talking about luxury. That's maybe not a great example because the Mercedes has more luxury versus just about quality. But I mean,
here's an example that'll help you for that, Murray.
Right.
If anybody in here has ever been in the nuclear industry and bought a nuclear coating, you will buy, to not name names, zinc product from manufacturer A off the shelf, and it costs $60 a gallon. You'll buy that exact same bucket of zinc with the letter N appended to the end of it because of the traceability and document and quality paperwork behind it. It will cost you $1,200 a gallon.
Right.
It's the exact same bucket, but because of all the stuff that goes along with it, the quality of the materials is locked in. It has to be these, no substitutions. The traceability and the quality requirements that follow that bucket are, what cost so much more.
But one of the things that I struggle with the people that I work with, and I know we're tied to the low bid wins model, right? We're tied to that in municipal infrastructure. And I've already, I don't know how we get around that. I wish we could, because the best contractors that I know of are just not interested in chasing these jobs that they spend all this time bidding, knowing that some guy's going to come in. Let's be honest, the guy who wins the job on these open public bid wins is the guy who made the biggest mistake. And the reason he usually gets the job because he either made the biggest mistake or he really doesn't know what he's doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're probably going to be low bid.
Engineers should check that, though. We do a lot of bid review services for that reason.
Or I'll tell you, Murray, even worse, what they really try and do when they low bid it is they'll go in and try and submit changes to the original spec that are not in conformance with what was originally desired, either in the coating's quality, the coating style. But that's also a huge one, is they're going to go and say, well, we planned on using steel shot instead of grit. It's like, we ain't using that shit. We don't recycle. You should have read the spec. It's no recycled abrasives. And they'll come in and like, well, we bid it with recycled abrasives. That's going to be another $100,000, right? Now you're locked into a contract where they're coming and telling you their means and methods are not dictatable by us, which they were in the specification. So it's everything you're saying, but worse, because now they want to come in. They realize they realize they underbid it. And now they got to come in and be like, what corners do we cut? I'm sorry. Yeah, that's just the conversation they have. Yeah,
I was wondering if it was going to be me or.
That is absolutely a challenge. But the problem is that, once again, this is just from my world what I see. I've had conversations where I've tried to get them. I'm not going to sit here and say that the QP program is foolproof. I'm not going to say that, because there's holes in that as well. Right. But we need some way of pre-qualifying so we get a set of quality bidders that are bidding against each other, instead of this guy's really good, this guy sucks, because the guy who sucks going to win, and then we never get ahead. And so we got to figure this out. But also, I've had the conversation with municipal owners and they said, well, we don't want to restrict who can bid it. And I'm like, oh, you absolutely do. No, we want to have a wide open bid. I'm like, no. You do not.
The 5 years no longer works either. The 5-year minimum experience is such bullshit. There's so many workarounds with that too that just doesn't fly anymore. Yeah. And you're right about the QP. I mean, it has its advantages for sure from a training. You're getting some kind of semblance of quality control, safety. So it does have its place. And I agree. Everything you're saying, Murray, is 40 years of me living with City of Phoenix and all the areas of municipalities, Vegas, everywhere we deal, Albuquerque. And it's the same way. We get a contractor in there, a general contractor, even sometimes like, oh, we'll just redo this concrete water tank at 20 million gallons. Like, no, you won't. And it's just a shit show from there. And that's the unfortunate part, is the municipalities are the ones that end up having to pay the price for that.
They're also the ones that chase the low hanging fruit. They're the ones that chase the low number.
But it's tricky for them also, though. Well, it's tricky from a
standpoint.
What's
that? Bill needs to say something. He's going to do it.
Well, I just meant it's tricky restricting it, someone from bidding it because of nepotism, or from, hey, I have a friendship. So that it's tricky to exclude bidders, and only through quality, in my opinion, can you do that.
Yeah, I just remember my young days at SSPC working with Murray, and we were working in Ontario with the Ministry of Transportation. And all the times we would literally want to walk out and pound our heads on the wall because they agreed to everything we're talking about, but they would never pull the trigger on going with the qualified contractor route.
And look at how that has improved the transportation agency in the U.S. I mean, there are a lot of states now invoking QP1. I'm just going to leave QP2 aside because it doesn't focus on quality. And it's worked. I mean, they're still awarding low bid, but it's pre-qualified.
Low bid
And-
between a set of contractors.
Yes,
I'm perfectly fine with that.
And the QP1 certified, accredited contractors understand PA2, or they're required to understand that.
And they
along
have
with-
trained
That's right.
QC people.
Right. So that's the value.
Now, see, Drayton's
like it.
disagreeing with this, so
Well-
I want to hear your piece, Drayton.
So the QP program on paper is excellent, right? It just becomes tax, though. It just becomes tax, right? So I've never done an audit or been involved in a QP1 audit, but I've seen the checklist. And if SSPC at the time probably had, I don't know how many AMP auditors exist to this day, but I guarantee you that there is a drastically underprepared number of auditors for the number of
I
QP1s.
wouldn't disagree with that.
And so now it basically just becomes cut us a check. Now, no offense to AMP, I think they mean well. There's nothing
Right.
wrong with the program on its face, but if you can't enforce it, so similar to all some of the other things we talked about adding in a spec, right? Oh, it's you say do PA2 and that's enough, right? It might be if you actually enforce it in the field or you enforce it when the contract is delivered, but if we can't uphold what QP1 means, it'll kind of devalue itself, which in my mind, at my age and the last 15 years or so that I've seen in the industry, and I started in Florida, David, in the DOT world, Murray, and that arena is rife with it. It's not as bad as I think in the municipality water sector, but it is still just a tax at this point. I don't think it effectively helps. I've still got joint QC superintendents that are, having these roles that are, contradicting themselves. And I would prefer that if they just carte blanche and just said, in all our respects, a QC person full-time who has no other roles and responsibility has to be on site anytime the contractor is there. That alone, I think, would solve a bunch of problems.
That's really great in your spec if you write that in there, but we're talking about a broad-based thing, right? I think we need the QP program, but I think the QP program needs to have way more teeth or sharper teeth.
Yes. I'm not saying that last bit was how you would fix it. The QP program is, in effect, it's helpful, right? Because like you're saying, we want you
could be
to
more
pay.
helpful if it had more teeth.
Yeah,
I've seen it happen too many times where they've looked at one industry and say, "Oh, we got to be careful how we take this because this is going to affect the bridge market because they also work in bridges." And I'm like, I don't care. I'm just in my world, they're not doing a good enough job, and they should be taken to task, right?
But this is the same problem as PA2, right? Can I just say contractors need to be QP1, QP3 certified or QP2 certified, and we're good? Because I don't do that. I don't like that. We use the QP program often, but for more critical and certain instances, for whatever reason, I've tried to make it the base model standard, but I've had a hard time giving any sort of case histories internally with our projects from tanks that have been painted for non-QP certified applicators to ones that have, to show that there's any discernible quality difference that's attributable to the QP program.
You need to talk to Dan Zarate, who's back working, I think, with NAFAC again, if I remember correctly. So Dan Zarate had done a lot of the with the fuel tanks and stuff like that for the Navy. So there's a lot of evidence on it, but on the DoD side.
Yeah, so we are a big federal engineer too. So we do a lot of DoD and federal work, but ultimately, that market is already required for QP. So
yeah,
that it's not as helpful. And I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but in the quality of work that we have seen, I certainly have contractors that are good enough to be doing our work that are not QP certified. And I have plenty of QP certified contractors that are blacklisted.
Sean Browning just made a comment there. PA2 is one tool. And I agree. Like that's the thing, Sean, is that it's, and I've been sharing content on that, is that it's a combination. It's QC, it's QA. It's everything. And yes, absolutely, it's getting a good contractor. And all of that, every last one of those things is going to drive the cost of your project up.
That's all. So
it is.
What you need to have a successful installation is distilled down to the right installation of the right product, right? So inspection, none of those things are necessary. They are all insurance to getting the right installation. So as long as people understand that all of these are a means to success, they are easy to swallow a pill to pay for. Very easy to swallow the pill.
So real quick, I want to touch on this. I don't know if this is like this anywhere else, or I'm not even, for sure that it happens everywhere down here. But if I'm not mistaken, a bunch of water, wastewater, municipal stuff, like the plant's operating salary or their salaries are based on their operating expense. So if they reduce their annual cost, they get more in their paycheck. And I had an oxygen plant that hadn't been inspected 30 years, was filled with pitting all over the pipes. There were 2 inches of ice on some of them. They were not going to shut it down. They were going to pay somebody to blast, paint, but I don't usually get concerned with this kind of stuff. This situation, I was actually really nervous that I priced this job at like $400,000 at a minimum, with the amount of detail work that had to go into it, with all of it. They said, well, we have a guy that'll do it for $50,000.
Yeah, listen, I've had that scenario where people who it's a commodity to hire the contractor, and their job, I get paid a bonus if I pick the lowest bidder. So the 2 guys in the truck, and I remember one time being in front of a group of engineers, and the procurement person was saying it in front of the director of procurement that, listen, I get more money at the end of the year if I save the company money. But the engineer, they're specifying a certain contractor qualification or product or way to do things. It's not about saving money. It's what's going to preserve the asset and keep them up and operating, because guess what? If it's a refinery and it goes down for an hour, how many millions of dollars are they losing?
So there's a tangled web here.
We lost Bill. Did Bill get tired?
He said he had to go.
No, AMP called him, and they got him working on PA2 right now.
Murray, they said you missed first dinner at the home, but the second dinner is now, Bill. Come on back.
No,
he's retired now. I figured, he's on a yacht somewhere, right? He's in that one behind David.
Exactly.
He's doubling the readings right now.
Yeah. So there's a tangled web. So this is a great group of people to help understand the web of requirements for building. So let's get away from operations and maintenance. No, we can even do O&M work, right? So if the plant is being built and you're doing traditional design bid build, so we won't talk about other delivery models at this point because we've been talking about competitive bid recently. We're talking about building a plant and I'm the owner, right? I contract somebody to develop and engineer the new part of the plant, the expansion or what have you we're doing. And it's usually based on insight of its operations and maintenance problems, right? We want to go in and do an assessment of the existing stuff. But if it's totally new, they start from scratch and they give it off. The requirements that we get to do that are like very vague, right? Nobody gets into the nitty gritty with an OE and says, this is your corrosion control plan. No, they'll say, this is your corrosion control methodology, right? We want to resist corrosion. We want a 30-year design life with, time to first maintenance. Sometimes they'll even get so far as to say 30-year maintenance free or something like that, which typically they're talking about the overall plant. They're not even talking about paint or the piping materials, right? Then we get that and we have to design something that another party, totally unrelated to us, can interpret to get to what the owner asked us for. So it's 3 people in telephone right now, right? So to your point about the oxygen plant, the bad repairs, your pricing being high, every step of the way, there's a multiplier for cost. The owner thinks it's going to be $1 million. The engineer at feed level 1 says might be $1.5 million. They think they're anticipating for escalation for cost reasons. Lo and behold, COVID happens. It's $2.5 million by the end of it all. And that creep that happens is because of trying to translate to somebody who isn't you, right? I need to guarantee that what I'm writing and specifying gets implemented. I hate that I feel like I have to over specify. I got to shoot over what I'm looking for. So if I want 10 mils, I got to ask for 12, right? You can't do that either because you don't know if you're going to get a good contractor that's going to put 12 on, or if you're going to get a bad contractor that will give you your 10. So you have to operate on good faith at a certain point. You have to balance cost and productivity. We don't have a vested interest in a 30-year life cycle plan. I think that's problematic. we have a vested interest in creating great designs, and there's marketing there, right? If the Dow chemical plant's still in business in 30 years, they might call us back to design their next plant in 10 or something. But there is no incentive for that. Warranty chasers, which is very common, right? All we got to do is get to a year or 3 or 5. Or
Oh, yeah.
That's all we need to do. So we have to translate these written documents into $1 billion of asset and infrastructure. And even our portion of that is very integral to the success of this projects. And we use tools like the A2, the QP program to elevate the floor and to give people a seat at the table. So all in all, I just asked the industry as a whole, as well as this panel of people, how far up can we take the floor before we're no longer getting an ROI? The performance cost is worth the squeeze. And that's a rhetorical question. I don't expect anybody to have an answer, because I think ultimately, if you do work for, let's say, ExxonMobil or a big major in oil and gas, or you're doing work for the city of Phoenix, the risk appetite is different. Someone like ExxonMobil knows what they want and how they want it, and they don't care what it costs, because, like you said, David, they know that Jim, if it comes down for 20 minutes, that's $1 billion in lost product and revenue and time and all this other stuff. The municipality has got funding issues. So the federal, if you got state revolving fund or something that's funding your project for capital reasons, it has to be Build America, Buy America. It's got to be competitive, low bid. You need at least 3 bidders. There's obstacles in the way. And so navigating all of that is why people like us have a job. Or at least, I think that's part of what I do, at least, and I'm sure part of it for Murray and everybody else too.
Sure.
So I want to have the level increase, and I would like to see that the return on our investment is worth it. But I don't want it to end up like the QP tax, right? Where it's just a number that isn't effective.
Yep.
Well, I would argue that, the QP program is effective in a lot of markets. It's not effective in all markets.
Sure.
And the reason it's not effective in all markets is because it's newer. For instance, it's been a lot newer being implemented, say, in municipal infrastructure like water, wastewater, than it has been with the DOTs or the DOD, right? They were first. They were the first guys to come on board and say, yeah, we like this. And so they're seeing the successes. It's got to work. We got to work through some of this. But I think it would be a mistake to abandon it from municipal infrastructure. It's painful. I'm working with some clients right now where it's absolutely painful that they're working through it. And it's because that the contractors are taking liberties and they're doing stupid stuff and they're trying to circumvent the system, and they're trying to, one guy gets it as a QP and then he subs it out to a non-QP guy. All this stuff is going on, which is actually not even legal within the program.
Yep.
Right. But one of the things I would agree with you wholeheartedly on, Drayton, is that there's not enough auditors, there's not enough people going around, and there's not enough teeth in the program from what I see in my world. And I live in a very secluded water and wastewater world. I don't play much outside of that anymore. I have in the past, but over the last probably 15 years, I've predominantly worked in water and wastewater. And I see there where we're going through this painful thing because I just had this come up. Well, we don't have enough QP contractors in our specific area, so we want to remove it from the spec. And I'm going, well, there are some. There are guys, but what happens is the guy who doesn't have it is writing in saying, hey, I don't think this is fair. And now everybody goes, oh, maybe we're not being fair. We don't want to be seen as not being fair. But there are guys that are in the area that have it, but now they're wishy-washy on it because there's not enough guys with it. But it takes time.
That's a market forces thing. I certainly think that if the municipalities generally all agree that they're going to include it and only 1 or 2 people have it at first, that 1 or 2 guys for that billing cycle or that capital year or 2, he's going to name his price. And then everybody else is going to go, oh, crap, I better get in there, man.
Right. Well,
and that will help drive competitive bid back down.
And I've always said this to everybody when I'm talking to the owners. I said, you have to move first. The contractors are not going to come on board if you're not. They're not going to just go out and get QP1 for the sake of themselves. No. You have to move first. And you can do it in a sense that, well, what if we do it and there's not enough? Well, you grandfather and you say, you let the contractors know that traditionally bid your work, that as of January 2026 or whatever date you want to pick in the future, you put them on notice that QP1 or QP8 or whatever it is going to be a requirement. And if the guys think you're bluffing and don't move, shame on them. But the owner has to move first.
So here's
the
another
contractors
thing.
won't move until they do.
In your industry, water and wastewater specifically, I have found it is like pulling teeth to get them to do third-party inspection as well.
It is.
So there's another added cost layer, and I think part of that is traditionally that market segment would procure third-party inspection on a separate contract.
I see they constantly try to bury the third party with the contractor.
Yeah, and I hate that.
I hate
everything
that's the dumbest. Oh, that's the most infuriating
I hate that
thing.
with everything I am, because I've worked in that situation. It's a horrible situation because the contractor thinks you're working for them, and they say, I don't like that what you put in that report, and if you don't change it, I'm not paying you. I don't want to be in that position. Right.
So Greg is back right now, and Greg is a QP5. And so QP5 is one of the very few DoD world where they do lump the contractor in as being who sources the third-party inspection. Yeah. So Greg can certainly tell you about navigating working for the contractor.
Yeah, we work for both. I mean, general contractors, but yeah, a lot. Chad's actually my partner's in Kwajalein right now. We're also working in Guam, Alaska, Texas, California. Those are all QP projects, but they're Corps of Engineers, so like fuel tanks, Air Force.
But are you hired through the contractor or through the owner?
By the way, I just want to echo, Murray, everything you're saying, Drayton. I'm on record. I 100% agree with. We're generally, believe it or not, depending on the general contractor, we like to work at minimum for the general contractor, but I would say at least 50% of the time we're hired by the paint contractor.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yep.
So it's tricky for sure.
But the problem is that, and this is, to me, this is a cop-out. It's all because the owner doesn't want to have another contract.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
So that sucks. You know
they
what?
jeopardize the whole product.
Well, what really sucks, Murray, and I'll as a business owner, I'll share it with this panel. Think about you writing up reports that maybe aren't flattering or doing your job properly. Are they really going to want you to do the next tank on that job with them, or am I pretty much out because I didn't want to conform? You know, like what you're saying, you really are in a bad position because you have to handle things a little bit differently than maybe you always would, and that's
right. And that's actually a horrible position to put your inspectors in, especially young guys who are coming up. They're learning the ropes.
Agreed.
And now they're up against it, and they're like, well, I don't want to say anything bad because I want to get their next job. I don't want them to think I'm a bad guy. So I'm gonna smooth this over so that we keep this relationship. I don't have a problem with having a good relationship and like I'm a friendly guy and I can be friendly with you and still hold your feet to the fire. Right. I don't have to be don't have to be an asshole to do my job. Pardon my French. I can do my job and still be friendly and cordial to you, but I'm not going to let you away with it because we had lunch beside each other today.
Well, Murray, to be honest with you, just to go a background of why I was so adamant over my 40 years, and Sean Innes and some of the other people on this call are so adamant about learning their trade, is because I will call the owners of every one of those paint companies personally and let them know we're trying to match up personalities with inspectors, but I'm going to let them know this is my interpretation of the specification. Let me know where you guys differ. And I'll have those conversations with their foreman, their superintendents far before my inspector gets there, just to really have that understanding of what their equipment they're bringing, you know, what pushbacks, what pinch points we might have, PA2 being one of them, right? How are you guys interpreting that? What gauges are you bringing? We have all those conversations. So I really set them up for success
I think that's probably more rare than it is the norm.
There's a chapter for that in the NACE book. It's called The Importance of the Pre-Job Meeting.
Yeah.
Do you know
how many times that doesn't happen?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
On all the jobs on ours, we do, only because, again, we've built relationships over the years. I was a manufacturer's rep. My story is very similar to yours, Murray. I tinted paint when 17 years old, didn't graduate college, high school, any of that. I used to tint paint. Then I moved up into some of the, DeVoe coatings in the 90s and kind of went through, Tanema, Carboline, all the way down the line. And and I just appreciated people that always learn their trade because of that specifically. So when a contractor says, what do you know about PSI at the nozzle, or what do you know about nozzle sizes or any of that shit? We know way more than they do. So like knowing that, it's harder for them to challenge you. You're not just preaching standards, you're actually involved with the work they're performing and doing. So anyone that was on the tools or anyone that has experience, even manufacturers reps, believe it or not, have their due, because they're generally pretty sharp with generic types of paints and where they perform and whatnot, reading data sheets and things of that nature. So I'd appreciate anyone that's on the call to really learn their trade extremely well, and then have those conversations before they show up on the job site. You bring a 185 compressor and you're required to dig 3 mil profiles and you're bringing 200 feet of hose. What I'm saying is, why even start, right? I mean, why do you want to go down that road of frustration? That's my recommendation.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I'm a firm believer that the QA should always be hired by the owner.
Me too.
I think like suck it up, have another contract, have somebody on a standing contract where they're your QA people for a year or two or whatever, but have a contract set up, because then there's true value. Then the guy's not between a rock and a hard place of trying to, like, his work is getting paid for and coming from. But I don't personally. Also, one of the things that I push back on is that, and I know it's hard, I understand it. Whenever possible, utilize hold point, especially with concrete. It's not as easy with steel, but on concrete, you're not going to lose the blast on concrete, right? So utilize hold point inspections. If you have local inspectors and stuff, utilize hold point inspections, as opposed to paying for a guy to sit in his truck watching video while you're working, and then he's only needed for a couple hours a day. And now I know that for business owners, that's a hard thing to manage, but having a day's inspection or day or two where you're on site for the critical points, and then you're gone for a while while they're pissing around, then you come back for a couple, that can save the job money. We have to find a way to make QA, like QC it should be embedded in the contractor. Like, it's not sometimes, it's every time. And I agree with you 100%. It's full time. The guy who's spraying can't also be the QC guy, right? It's got to be a separate guy. And that's going to drive the cost up. I get it. Quality costs money, but it will come out in the wash. It will. But until we take the position where we're going to start doing it that way, right? And prioritizing, look, when it comes to maintenance, one of my pet peeves is, why do a whole bunch of stuff really crappily and put a Band-Aid on a whole bunch of stuff, as opposed to picking a couple things and doing them really well? Because very few times, there's always exceptions to every rule, but most of the time you can put something off. Yeah, it looks bad or whatever, but you could put it off for a couple years. It's not going to collapse. If it's got to the point where you're worried about it collapsing, then there's bigger problems in your organization than this. But prioritize things and start doing them right, to the best of your ability, using the best products, the best contractors, and let's move forward with that mindset so that we now get ahead of it. Eventually, you're going to get ahead of it where you're not going to have to look at that asset again for 30 years. You can move on to the other things. But what I see is we just keep repeating and doing things, a whole bunch of things, horribly, and they have to be redone again in 5 years, right? Like, that's a dumb plan, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Or
So,
really no plan, actually.
from an asset maintenance standpoint, right? Like, we talked a little bit about, it's so much easier to do it right the first time. And ultimately, it's a weird double-edged complaint, because we also then say, well, they love to spend money on it up front, but they don't want to spend money to maintain it. Well, that's a little untrue, because they love to spend some money on it up front.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of cost cutting on capital, and your funding mechanism dictates a lot of that. But ultimately, when we did like the impact studies, which, and Jim, maybe you'll know a little bit more, but I think the last impact study was done 10 years ago. Right. Yeah. 8 years ago or something. I don't know if AMP has any plans to do another impact study, but I think it would be an insane escalation from the last one that was done, especially because we count the corrosion control over the life cycle of the asset. And it would be very beneficial to the industry to have more solid numbers to point to from those people, the respondents in the original study, to go back and say, we have seen the cost of corrosion control triple over 10 years or whatever. So it totally justifies the expenditures for quality assurance being third party performed upfront on the job, the QP program style, elevation of the craftsmanship through inspection, through quality control training, it's specification training too, right?
Yes.
It's not all in the contractor either.
Yep.
I certainly won't say that. I would
Well,
love
no,
to say,
I can tell you, I've investigated a lot of failures in my day, a lot, and as big and small, and a lot of them, and if not in whole, at least in part, can be traced back to a bad spec, right?
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah.
I will say that I have been in rooms where I've been overrided, and I'm like, I'm not asking you. This is wrong. You cannot do this. And I've had to go up above people to go like, this is not right. And it's just like, in one ear, out the other. They don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say all engineers are like that. A lot of times there's a lot of pressure put on the engineering community to meet certain other goals, right? Like get a deliverable out the door or whatever it may be.
Well, the engineering firm isn't some magic entity that has an unlimited budget with endless, bottomless pit of money that comes to them. They have a budget and they bid jobs, and they have to make profit too, right?
And we don't have. As an industry, I think if you go back to the materials engineers, right, those guys, they kind of absorbed corrosion on the side. Like they're like, oh, paint. Like, yeah, I'm already a materials engineer, so I'll just kind of do a little paint stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the floors, the Bechtels, the big guys in the oil and gas and the highly regulated markets found value in having somebody on staff that spoke that language, right? And that spread a little bit to coatings. But ultimately, in the municipality world, what I found is that there are city engineers who are usually second generation, good school. Their dad said they could go, they get hired in, and they get handed the paint spec because they're the lowest person on the totem pole and they have no idea how to even be an engineer, let alone do paint stuff. And they call their Sherwin-Williams rep or whomever that they saw at the lunch and learn or the AWWA thing. And
who
what that
may have
says
been
is
in
gospel.
who may have been in his position for 8 minutes.
Or was an architectural rep who became a PMC rep tomorrow.
Or he was
yesterday.
working at Foot Locker last week and he got a job. Right?
Absolutely. And his work
Does
becomes
Foot Locker
gospel.
even exist anymore? I use that analogy too much.
So.
I don't even know if it's still around anymore. I need a new analogy.
But you're right. I mean, ultimately, the people that are handed some of the most important first lines of defense specifications tend to be the lowest man on the totem pole, man or woman. And they're typically totally unprepared to be handed this. And so they copy paste the old one and go, I must be safe now.
Yeah. And another thing I see a lot is in a lot of engineering firms is that the architects within the firm hold the specs. So if they have an architect and engineer, the architects are the holder of the specs. And they typically don't know enough to really do it, right?
We have a similar, so specifically you talk about concrete being a pain in the butt, right? Like if there's concrete stuff, it almost always ends up going to an architect and I get very,
and they don't,
it feels like I'm talking on deaf ears. They're just like, no, that's not what we do. I'm like, it is though.
No,
it is what we do.
Yeah. I see it a lot. The architects, I guess it, and they don't, they're more, them being a bit facetious, but what color are we painting it? like that, that matters. In a shit tank, right?
Yep. But ultimately, I think to the point, we look to AMP to be the beacon for the industry.
They have
to be.
When we
talk about putting out workforce development initiatives, which they did form this new board and stuff, we talk about specifier engagement, right? So like I see who goes to and engages with AMP mostly in the in-person events, right? And as a specifier, I tend to gravitate to those people because I'm like, hey, you must be in oil and gas, because if you weren't, you wouldn't be here. And it tends to be overly represented. And obviously corrosion control, material selection, those are very oil and gas centric ideologies. But from a certain standpoint, we need to get the municipalities involved in the local chapters. We need to at least even tell them that there is a way to get help that isn't your local rep. Not that that person may be right or wrong, but at least get a second opinion.
Yep.
I've got a video dropping in a couple weeks that you guys will find interesting on this topic. But I want to just, Jim, we're coming up to quarter to the hour.
Yeah.
And I just want to bring it back around to PA2, which is a discussion. So I think that once again, I don't think that the standard needs to be blown up. I don't think it's like we don't need to trash it. We don't need to do any of that. What we need to do is to put some language in there, get a committee together, or whatever, to put some language in there to make sure that people understand that it may not be adequate for quality control, right? And I think
if we can get people to agree on that.
If we can get people to agree on it, we need to have a panel. You'd have a hard time convincing me that it's enough, but I'm willing to listen.
So they do what's called a JTA, a job task analysis, for the credentialing program. It might not be a bad idea to, if Bill's still on the phone, he could probably facilitate this, to have a more formalized version of Jim's poll, right? Where we go out to all the members of SEO1, SEO2, all the relevant, standards committees, and say, how are you using this? Is it sufficient for how you're using it? Do you think it's used effectively? An impact study of PA2, because it is such an integral and central document to these.
But
projects.
I think the question has to include: do you think it's adequate for quality control? It is adequate for quality assurance, I believe. It's quality control I have the problem with.
I think that if you ask that question to 1,000 people, statistically, I'm assuming that I don't want 1,000 people's answers. I need the quality of that answer to go up, right? So people like yourself, Murray, who have been in failure analysis cases, have longevity in the industry. I'm walking myself out of a boat here, by the way, because ultimately what I perceive is being challenged. I don't know if it is or isn't anymore. But the way, if you'd asked me that question a year ago, I'd have been like, this is how you do it. Right. Same with, look at the 2024 rewrite of SPO 188. It rocked the hell out of the industry. It's still not even calmed down. The waves are still rolling. So,
yeah.
and that was blowing up the standard. It's the same number and it's just a revision number, but that standard got blown up, right? Because it was reworked from the ground up, because we were wrong for 20, 30, 50 years, however long the original SPO 188 had been out. We had been measuring holidays with inconclusive evidence to justify something was correct. Verify conformance was wrong.
And as critical as that step is.
Yes.
And
so
I think
needs that. We got to look at it.
I think this standard is as critical as 0188. And I think it needs another look. And I think we need to get some smart people together and talk about it and hash it out and fight it out. It'll probably take 2 years or 2.5 years.
I feel like you could make an appendix for it, like add a QC sector, or like a add-on to it.
That's
a commentary. Do a commentary.
Yeah, that's another thing that I suggested, because I presented this to Coatings Pro to publish, and they declined, and they explained why they declined, and I got it. I understood.
Yeah.
I wasn't bitter or any of that. I got it, right? And I wanted them to understand. I said, I'm not trying to crap all over PA2. I think it's a real problem that needs to be discussed.
Yeah.
And I told them that I am going, like, I don't want bad blood between me and AMP. I teach for AMP, and I'm doing a WebEx for them in next week. I'm doing a webinar or whatever they call it. It's a Coatings Pro webcast. Yeah, webcast. I'm doing next on the 14th. So, I mean, I don't want to tick them off, but I said I am going to publish this on LinkedIn, and I want to start a conversation. I'm going to release my video because I think it needs to be talked about. And they said 100%. They didn't push back to say, no, you can't do that or anything. So they know that the conversation now needs to happen. I think it was a bit of an eye opener. I don't think that the problem was something that was high on their list, wasn't on their radar. But I think the amount of times I've dealt with this over the last 15 years and longer, 25 years of, I think it's not enough or whatever. I think it's time we at least have a conversation, get some people together, and let's see what we can do to make it better. It can't hurt to make it better, right?
100%. And Dre, now I'll talk to Bill Corbett. He had to jump off, but I'll talk to Bill Corbett about the survey, because that is an awesome idea, by the way.
Yeah, I think so. Let's get a general consensus.
Yeah.
And then for me, ultimately, Murray's people like yourself and Bill and all the wonderful, very
old
intelligent,
guys,
wise people that can help me not make the mistakes of the industry from 30 years ago. thickness of the film and its ability or its criticality in the performance of the coating is something that is often up for debate, right? The older guys used to say, well, more is always better, right? More paint means more barrier protection or what have you. And we know that that's untrue.
Yes.
Yeah, of course we know it's untrue now. But when we look at something like holidays on pipelines and how critical they are because of, impressed current systems, now we have over voltage, we've got small pinholes, you get exacerbated pinhole corrosion, and then bam, you've got through all and you've got an explosion.
Yeah.
Mostly PA2 could be amended, I think, based on the criticality of the structure in a specifier note or commentary to say, hey, if you're talking about a tank lining, you want more stringent requirements, right? But if you're doing an atmospheric structural steel PA2, is it justifiable to increase the amount? Probably not. These things fail slowly.
If you're measuring the columns that are going in Walmart, probably not critical, right?
But ultimately, the role that thickness plays in the coating's performance, right, I think has been diminished over the years.
It's very important.
Yes, it has become less important than it used to be, and it should be brought back to the forefront of because I think a lot of times it was underplayed, right? The resin type's more important, and well, you got 10 to 20 mils, so is 10.5 effective at doing its job as a lining as effective as 20? Or is it less effective still? And these are all rhetorical, just thought-provoking questions for everybody listening and all of this stuff to say, hey, please look at what you're talking about. If you don't have somebody on staff that can do that, talk to Murray, talk to somebody, ask how critical is this? We should elevate the standards for critical pieces of equipment, critical infrastructure, but I'm not sure we can raise the floor up unequivocally across the board, but this task analysis might help that.
We just got to keep, I'm getting a bit long in the tooth now, and been around for a while, but my goal honestly is to try to make things better, right? Like we can make it better. And maybe it's because I've seen a lot, right? And I see a lot, and I think that there's stuff that we can do that we've learned and that we can get better at. And there's stuff that there's stuff that we focus on that is not as important as stuff we don't focus on. So I think all these conversations are fantastic, and we need to have more of them.
For sure.
And the young people, this should be loaded. These things should be attended by a ton of young people that want to learn.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. They don't even know that it's a thing. They don't at all. No one knows about it at all.
Right.
And then what they're doing now is, I get why, like college, you want the people that are pushing for, furthering their education. At that point, though, their degree is their focus, not the cert. And it's like
they're long gone from the corrosion.
They need to go to high school and start making this, like, this industry is so interesting. No one knows. No one knows at all, because I actually do everything. Like,
on just 1 second. There's a guy on the Heisen. If you're talking to me, look me up on LinkedIn and private message me, and I'd happily help you sort through that question. I can give you some good advice, I believe, for that. But yeah, by all means, reach out to me on LinkedIn, message me, and we can have a conversation.
And you may be able to get a job before you go.
You never know.
Yeah,
it's true.
But ultimately, David, to your point, I think, Jim, we should probably look at doing this at another time period. But like skilled through alternative methods, so the STAM like movement or whatever is so prevalent. And NACE's, well, I guess Legacy NACE, now AMP, has sort of a rose-colored glasses for reaching the youth, because like you're saying, we do like the student poster sessions, and I cannot tell you, I feel I'm a relatively intelligent person. I go to the conferences and chapter meetings, and the super austenitic duplex resistance to molten core salts presentation that takes up 60% of the thing, it's not reaching the youth. The youth. Sorry, it's not.
Well,
but if you put something that's more trade centric, field centric, and say, hey, that buddy of yours that has a French literature major in college and you're going to be graduating this year, I could probably get you $30 an hour coming out as a friggin' laborer in certain states, man. Just graduate high school. You know what I mean? And if you're decently intelligent and you'd like to stop breaking your back and you want to become an inspector, or you want to do something else, there's a million pathways there.
There is.
You can be successful without spending $60,000 on a college degree.
I agree with you 100%. And I think that we got to find some way to promote our industry. I grew up, and this is just, when I painted with my father and that, like half their crew was alcoholics, like that's just not the way it is anymore. But it was, we didn't get the best of the best, and we should be getting the best of the best. There's good money to be made. It's a real trade. Yeah. There's real stuff to learn. There's a real pathway to success. There's a whole industry out there. Like that's one thing that's different, let's say, than being an electrician or a plumber or something. There is a whole pathway through the protective coatings business that can lead you up a path to be like an inspector, an instructor.
No more instructors. They're full.
No more instructors.
I get the next slot. Okay.
Okay. Done. Well, when I retire from teaching, you got my slot, but you have to teach in Canada because I can only teach in Canada now.
I'm in Detroit. I can just jump over the like Toronto's close.
I grew up an hour from Detroit. I grew up outside of Grand Bend, Ontario. So
Jim's gonna blood vessel here. I think we got to wrap it up.
Well, someone did post a comment that really does answer a lot of the questions here, and it was this one. And we need more of these. They should start a podcast, and it goes back to that. It really is about the communication strategy. David and I are kind of working on I would say, a member consortium of AMP members. We're going to pull a working group together. We're going to really kind of come up with the challenges that the industry, both coatings and corrosion, has. What are the challenges? We're going to come up with some ideas as a group. We're going to recruit people as well to really go out there and champion ideas that AMP should do in conjunction to what the board is working on. I had the opportunity to talk to Alan Thomas, and I'm very good friends with Juan Caballero, and being able to talk to Juan and Kimberly join a lot of the people on the leadership side, on the membership side, is to try to really put things in perspective to help AMP to hopefully generate more interest with the young professionals, tackle some of these questions they have related to the QP program, PA2, all these things with specifications and ethics and how we can do things better in the industry. Because the thing that David and I said is, as an AMP member, we want to preserve and protect AMP as well, because that organization has really transcended SSPC and NACE, so many people's lives for almost 80 years now. If you look at the collective of SSPC and NACE, we want it to go on further in the future. And I think as members, all of us, every single member of AMP out there has to step up and take some ownership of this organization. And that's what kind of we're looking to try to do with this new group.
That's awesome. And I agree with Drayton, is that I think even since the merger, there's been seems to me to be a drift towards the intellectuals and away from the everyday applicator kind of guys. And I see that at the conferences as well. We need to get back. We need to bring it back because SSPC sort of championed that. I taught for NACE and I taught for SSPC, but it was always more connected to SSPC. I could go into Pittsburgh and go to 5, 6, 7 different offices, and I could talk to people there that I knew. I can't do that at NACE. I didn't know that I wasn't connected the same. But I think that we've lost a little bit, that they need to shift it back, because I think the SSPC part of it that was contractor centric and actual physical, tangible work part of it has been lacking. And we need to get that back, and we need the intellectual stuff. Don't get me wrong.
For sure.
I have no idea what you said there, but Drayton, that example you used about learning about, I don't know, whatever that was. But you gave a great saying that that's for intellectuals. That's not for the guy who's out in the field working day to day, making a difference and making projects last longer. We need both, but we seem to be drifting away from the trade worker, craft worker, and those guys are the glue. We really need them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So David, I'm sorry. David and I will have actually a live stream to kind of go over the framework of this initiative that we have, and then we're going to be calling for members to step up and volunteer. So go ahead, Drake.
I was going to ask. No, I was going to say, to your original point, Jim, it sounds like you're putting together a sort of task group that's going to interface with AMP, the new workforce development initiative that they have, and sort of be another resource for them. Because that's ultimately, if you're saying what I think is happening is that AMP is out of touch. So them
I'm
putting
not-
another
I'm not
initiative
saying-
together doesn't help anything
Well,
if
I'm not
they don't
saying-
actually find the right people to talk to them. So this should
Yeah,
help.
I think for me, it's not that. I think there's some indications it could happen. And Dave and I have had lots of conversations one-on-one about this, is that when you see something as a canary in the coal mine, when you see something happening, you got to step up and you got to take ownership. And I think a lot of times with AMP right now, again, maybe this is me accusing of all members, is I think people become a member and then they just are members and that's it. They're disconnected.
Right.
And we've got to this is a community. And the only way we're going to improve our industry, both coatings and corrosion, and future-proof it, because we got AI knocking on the doorstep, is that we've got to take ownership of AMP as a membership organization and make sure that we are fully engaged and helping bring in new people, new ideas, innovations, and all this stuff that we need to do, both on the practical side, the technical side, standards.
But you're talking about AMP needs to steer, right? So I'm saying from a member standpoint, I need AMP to be the beacon, right? I have a job. I cannot go out there and sing the praises of the CIP program or the QP program.
Drayden, I know that. But what I'm saying is they are the vehicle, but really we're the fuel for the vehicle. And I think what we have to be able to do is, to some level, there will be people, you volunteer, you're with TC, you do the technical communities, right?
Oh, a lot. I have huge
I'm
volunteer.
a TCI. I do a lot too.
So that's what I'm saying is that. And then, you've been talking a lot about, related to content. You've been putting stuff out there. It's really that. It's all that engagement that you're doing, and you're really enlightening and educating people. You contribute whatever amount of time you want to contribute. If you contribute a lot, like a Bill being retired and he's going to do so much. Murray does a lot. Greg does a lot. Yeah. David does a lot. So I guess the thing with it is really as a collective of, I don't know if there's 30 or 35,000 members right now. Across the globe and all these community chapters, I think really there's just a great opportunity for the members to step up. That's all I'm saying.
I agree. And I was the chair of the Ontario SSPC for like 10 years because nobody wanted a job. I didn't want to be chair for 10 years, but I felt like if I stopped, it would just die. Because when you put up, who wants to volunteer? It's like, nobody wants to volunteer.
Hey, Murray, it wasn't that it was nobody wanted to do it. It was that it was in Ontario, Canada.
Touche.
You can see how light it is out here. It's 100 degrees in Phoenix right now. It's 100 here today.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not 100 here.
I'm wearing a jacket.
All right, guys.
Guys.
Anything else before we break up?
Thanks for putting this together, Jim. I really appreciate it. I'm glad my stupid little video and paper sparked a conversation, which is what I hoped it would do.
Well, I'm waiting for the next one.
Yeah. So I'm glad that my dumb little video, me barking at the moon, got some attention and people started paying attention and we got a good conversation about it. That's the only thing I can hope for. And I'll keep barking at the moon.
All right.
I appreciate you doing this, Jim. It was really enlightening. Yeah. I think it's these kind of candid conversations that happen around these tables, or the reason I started the TCI, which was a roundtable originally, was to have candid conversations that were publicly available for people to see. AMP attended them and asked me to start the TCI because of it. But ultimately, so many, you saw the people in the comments, right? There's a lot of people out there. If you are the shepherd, Jim, which you sort of now are kind of the shepherd, you're the original coatings influencer in my mind. Be that shepherd and give the avenue out to introduce people like David and Sean Ennis and the other people who are coming up making content. Let that platform be the way that we get to TikTok or whoever the youth is looking at nowadays. I don't know. But yeah, ultimately for this to be something that can be done again, let's have 4 more people come talk. It doesn't even have to have a theme anymore at this point. I think we've already broached that. It could be workforce development. It could be, NACE, SPO 188. It could be, you name it. There's something to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, it could be Coatings Talk Symposium, which I'm going to launch this online event. Registration, you can register. It's for free. I'm going to have a lot of great subject matter experts doing technical presentations and coatings and corrosions on December 2nd. And I'm hoping it can be a 4 to 6 hour event. And, the platform that I have that can do it can host up to 1,000 registrations, but I know I'm not going to hit that amount. But, again, that's something I'm going to be real pushing hard on, and then working on these initiatives and things like that. But the coatings talk that we had tonight is excellent conversation tonight. And there's going to be much more coming. So I appreciate every one of you.
And thanks everybody who joined and made comments. It's without that, it's completely
Blue Jays are up.
Thank you. See, go Jays.
Thanks, Jim.
Suck it,
Don't get on-
Tigers.
Oh no!
Don't get on
And
TikTok.
suck it, Yankees.
I will clarify. I do not mean go on TikTok to do this, but honestly, like David, you see super yachts have a TikTok where you're just like on $1 million boat taking some gloss meter readings. That's interesting. Some people like that, man.
That's what I was trying to do.
Awesome. Yeah.
I was nervous about like the yacht side is like such a. There's like 4 of us in the whole country that do it.
Isn't that amazing? 4.
And, like that's
Wow.
it. And they're like level 1 or 2. They're not even.
I'd be happy to test some of the boats out for you guys if you need me.
Yeah. It's
Great.
this industry's wild.
Greg, great to meet you
Yeah.
formally. I've seen you guys on LinkedIn and whatnot, but great to meet you formally. Hopefully, let's make a plan at AMP 2026 to have a coffee together.
Absolutely. I really look forward to seeing everybody there. We will be there for sure in Houston. So really
Shameless plug. TCI meeting. I have a big slot, and I'd like to fill it with wonderful conversations like this.
I have one too.
Oh,
I have a
I'm
big
in.
slot, PCI concrete. Come and join.
Yes.
I'm in for that one, Murray. I love concrete too. So
Come and join the TCI talk.
I'd love to.
All right, man.
Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
All
Jimmy.
right, everybody,
guys.
have a good rest of your night, evening, or morning, no matter where you're watching this. Thank you, guys. Good night, everybody.
Cheers.